everybody. My name is Nancy Perkins, and I'm a resource teacher in the Office of Secondary English Language Arts. It's my pleasure to walk you through these activities as a way of introducing you to the new Grade 8 English Language Arts draft curriculum that was created this summer. I really hope that you like what you see, and I hope that you'll consider piloting all or some of this curriculum during this school year. First of all, credit where credit is due. These are the fine folks who worked diligently together, starting actually last spring, to organize and create this curriculum. In BCPS, we have a proud tradition of having curriculum written for us, by us. So here you can see the names of your colleagues who worked so hard to put this curriculum together. Now you might be thinking that we already had an 8th grade curriculum. It's now called the Legacy Curriculum. So why do we need this new curriculum? What makes this curriculum different? Well, the biggest change for 8th grade is that we now have access to the collections resources. Collections, if you didn't know, 8th grade was the last year to receive collections. Collections now exists in ELA in grades 6 through 12 in BCPS. So 8th grade, we finally joined the ranks. We now have collections. When you see collections in your classroom, you're going to see that it consists of a hardcover anthology as well as a paperback resource called the Close Reader. The selections within collections are all within these resources. We have them this way in hard copy, but the really cool thing about collections is that we also have digital access to all of the resources. And not only the selections, but also all of the teacher support materials we can get online. Collections also comes with additional sources. A couple of them are listed here. We have access to some videos that are educational support. We have access to other sources such as the Explore e-magazine and the FYI site, which gives us access to other informational text. We have the Level Up tutorials, which are skill-based tutorials that your students can work through when they need additional support in certain skills. And then there's also a section called Grammar Notes and another one called English Workshop that we have used in this curriculum as a way of supporting the grammar instruction. The 4 units of this new curriculum were created based on several of the units within the collections anthology. The individual lessons are based largely on these sources. However, we've also brought in some outside sources and included them in the curriculum whenever it was necessary or appropriate to do so. So if the individual lessons are going to be based on the shorter selections from collections, what about the reading of the novels? This now is the next biggest way that this curriculum is different from the former curriculum. The philosophy is now that the students will read a novel tied to each unit's theme during the unit at their own pace until they have finished reading it. The teacher will guide them by creating a reading schedule with deadlines that will most appropriately meet the needs of the students. Once the students have finished reading the novel, it will be discussed at length in class. Now don't worry, the students don't read the novels completely independently. There's lots of teacher support and lots of check-ins built into the curriculum that I'll be explaining to you as we go on. So don't panic if you've never taught a novel this way. We have built in lots of supports to help you, and I am going to be explaining those to you and walking through those with you as we go further. But what you need to know right now in this overview portion is that this approach, the Whole Novels approach, is based on the book Whole Novels for the Whole Class by Ariel Sachs. A couple copies of this book should be in your building somewhere, and I highly recommend that you read it. But the Whole Novels approach allows for more freedom of novel choice, more so than we've ever had in the past. We no longer all have to stick with reading the same novel in each of the units. We now have choice. As long as a novel is BCPS approved and it fits with the overarching theme of the unit, it can be read as part of the unit's instruction. So we'll talk more about the different novel choices as we go forward. I mentioned the themes of the units. Well, here they are for the whole year. The overarching theme in 8th grade remains challenges. It's been challenges for several years, and that hasn't changed. But now remember that these units are based on the units in the collections anthology. So we have Unit 1, the challenge of approaching adulthood. Unit 2, the challenge of writing an engaging story. Unit 3, the challenge of combining cultures. Unit 4, the challenge of living in a divided nation. So going into each of the individual units, how are the units organized? This should look very familiar to those of you who have taught BCPS curriculum in the past. The units are laid out this way. They start with an introduction to the unit theme and the essential question, and then there's a diagnostic assessment that will give you baseline information on where the students are currently working in terms of meeting the demands of the focus standard for each unit. Then you'll find the lesson sequence. Now, the lesson sequence is shorter than what you may be used to. There are a range of 8 to 13 lessons per unit. And of course, when you see that number, you have to realize that a lesson does not equal a day. Several of these lessons are going to take you several days to work through. That's why there are fewer of them within each unit. Then in the unit, there's a mid-unit learning check to measure progress that the students are making toward that focus standard. There's also still the county-launched periodic assessments. Now remember, the periodic assessments are going to measure students' progress towards several of the standards, not just the focus standards within each unit. And then, of course, there's the end-of-unit performance-based assessment that will measure the students' mastery of the focus standards that you've been working on through the unit. Within every unit, you're going to find that the students are going to read a variety of texts, the short stories, the novel that we already kind of talked about, informational articles, memoirs, biographies, poetry. I want to highlight poetry. There is poetry within every unit. I know that in the past it's been kind of a little tendency to skip poetry instruction, but I highly recommend that you not, because poetry often appears on PARCC. It often will appear on our periodic assessments as well. And also, once you get to Unit 4, the students are going to be asked to analyze the structure of a poem, so you don't want Unit 4 to be the first time students encounter a poem. You want to be working with poetry throughout the year. So it does exist in every unit. There's a variety of writing tasks. There are speaking and listening activities. There are grammar suggestions and vocabulary suggestions within every unit. So now, let's take a deeper look at the 4 units. So Unit 1, we start with the challenge of approaching adulthood. The essential question is, what experiences help develop a teenager into a mature, responsible adult? And by the way, there's only one essential question for every unit. This is the shortest unit in terms of lessons. There are only 8 lessons in this unit. We did this intentionally because we know that at the beginning of the year there's all sorts of startup activities going on that take a lot of time. Plus, within this unit, we have an emphasis on research. And research, as we know, can be kind of time-consuming. So we didn't want to overload the lessons so that you have plenty of time to work through the research components. This unit is based on Collection 4, which is called Approaching Adulthood, and Collection 6, The Value of Work, that are part of the Collections Anthology. Your novel choices connected to the theme, and remember our theme is the challenge of approaching adulthood. You can see the novel choices here: Roll of Thunder, Giver, Tangerine, Stars Beneath Our Feet, which is a newly approved book. It hasn't been purchased for your school, so if you're interested in that book, you need to talk about acquiring that book. It's an excellent book. The Outsiders, Seed Folks, etc. Remember that as long as a novel is going to match the theme, which is the challenge of approaching adulthood, it's fair game to be read during this unit. And then, as I mentioned, there's a research component to Unit 1. I would highly recommend that you talk to your media specialist about the instruction in this unit so that you can work together. Once you hit Lesson 5, there's a research module. Remember that the essential question for this unit was, what experiences help develop a teenager into a mature, responsible adult? For this research module, what the students do is they conduct research in order to write an argument on whether or not they think classes in etiquette or manners should be a required part of their schooling. That should be an interesting discussion. The research module is going to allow students practice with their research skills as well as practice with writing an effective argument with a strong claim and relevant evidence. The PBA for this unit, which I'm going to show you in a minute, also has a very strong research component. So that's why we have a research module in the middle of the unit to prepare the students for success on the PBA. Speaking of the PBA, here it is. So again, remember the essential question: what experiences help develop a teenager into a mature, responsible adult? For this PBA, the students are going to be asked to write an argument about whether an after-school club that they are interested in should be offered. So just very briefly, in a nutshell, the students are going to review a list of possible after-school clubs and determine which one would interest them the most. Now, don't worry, I know what you're thinking. Some of the choices for the clubs are things like computer gaming, social media, sleeping, relaxing, meditating, computer coding, robotics. Hopefully the students are going to be able to find something that they could say that they were interested in. Then they're going to conduct research to learn how participation in a club like that could help them develop the skills or qualities necessary to become mature, responsible adults. And then they're going to write their argument to convince advisors that their choice of clubs would be the best one to offer. And as an optional component, the students can present their arguments integrating multimedia or visual components. Unit 2 now. Unit 2 is the challenge of writing an engaging story. The essential question: how do authors engage readers' emotions? This unit has 13 lessons, that's the most in any of the 4 units, and it's loosely based on Collection 2, which is called The Thrill of Horror, and Collections. We've also included several online sources for selections in this unit because we wanted to cover humor as well as horror or suspense, so we went to outside sources. There are many, many outside sources included in this unit, so be selective. You're not going to be able to cover all of them. And then your novel choices, remember, as long as the students are reading an engaging story, the novel choice is going to fit. So ideas: Walk Two Moons, The Giver, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Milkweed, Summer, My German Soldier, etc. The performance-based assessment for this unit is a little bit interesting. The students are going to select a short story or a novel that they've read in the unit. They're going to complete a graphic organizer showing how differences in the points of view of the characters and the reader create such effects as suspense or humor. You'll recognize that that's one of our standards. But part 1 of this PBA that we just looked at could possibly be mastered prior to the PBA because the students are going to be doing this throughout the unit. They're going to be completing a graphic organizer showing how the differences in the points of view of the characters and the reader create effects such as humor or suspense. So if you get to the PBA and you feel like your students have already mastered that, they don't need to do it again. You can use something that they've done prior in the unit to assess as their PBA grade. However, if you feel like they still need some additional work with it, there is another activity provided in the PBA that they can do to show mastery of that standard. But the meat of the PBA is that the students are going to write an additional scene for whatever text that they've selected. And remember, these are just the PBAs in a nutshell. Of course, there's further information when you actually look at the PBA documents. Unit 3, we have the challenge of combining cultures. Our essential question: how do people develop a sense of belonging within a new culture? 12 lessons in this unit, and this unit is based on Collection 1, which is called Culture and Belonging in the Collections Anthology. Your novel choices connected to the theme, the challenge of combining cultures: Refugee, I Am Malala, Tasting the Sky, Dragon Wings, Seed Folks. I would highly recommend Refugee. That's a brand new book that has just been purchased for your school. Outstanding book, and I really think that the kids will enjoy it. So please take a look at that book. If you've never read it before, consider doing that book with your students. I really think they'll enjoy it. The PBA for this unit. They have a little scenario. The Baltimore County Office of Immigration Services is creating a new course designed to assist immigrant and American-born teenagers with understanding and respecting each other. Students have been chosen as members of a task force who are reviewing materials for the course. So part 1, students review a couple different sources and evaluate whether or not they would be appropriate for this course. Part 2, students write a critique or review of the sources and offer their recommendations to the Baltimore County Office of Immigration Services. Throughout the unit of instruction, the students are practicing with evaluating sources and also with looking at and writing critiques and reviews. So this would be that final end of unit assessment. And then Unit 4. We have the challenge of living in a divided nation. Now, this is based on a collection of sources where the selections are connected in some way to the Civil War. Now, that might seem a little bit out of place. However, 8th graders will be studying Civil War by the 4th quarter in their social studies classes. So this unit will actually dovetail with that instruction. It would be a really good idea to talk with your social studies teacher to find out what the students are doing in their class in terms of the Civil War, and then letting them know what you're going to be doing in your class, and maybe you'll find some ways that you can work together. But the essential question is, how can one individual's challenges reflect the struggles of an entire nation? 10 lessons within this unit, and these are based on Collections 3, which is called The Move Toward Freedom. And your novel choices connected to the theme: Chasing Lincoln's Killer, Killer Angels Waiting for the Rain, Letters from a Slave Girl, Free at Last, anything again that will fit that theme. The performance-based assessment for this unit, the students read the short story The Drummer Boy of Shiloh, which is in Collections, and also a poem titled The Drummer Boy of Shiloh. They analyze the structural elements of both texts. Remember, I told you that by the time they got to Unit 4, they would be analyzing a poem as part of the PBA, so here it is. That's another reason why I said you don't want to let this be the first time that they're examining poetry and analyzing poetry. The students are then going to write an essay explaining how both of the authors developed the idea that a drummer boy was a valued member of the Army during the Civil War. So that's a literary analysis task. All right, so there's the 4 units and the overview of the curriculum. So now, as we move forward in this training module, we're going to dig into some of the other components. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the layout of what the curriculum looks like. What are the folders in the curriculum? How are they organized? And then we're going to look at the individual lessons and get an idea of how they're organized and what they look like. Then we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the grammar instruction and how that was organized and created. And then we're going to spend a pretty good chunk of time talking about that whole novels approach, since I know that that's probably going to be new for a lot of you. But I want to let you know that we've done everything we could to make it as easy as possible for you. Okay, so I will look forward to talking with you in the next video.